Do you remember the summer of 1994? What was happening in TV, movies, and sports? Well, 1994 was the one and only time I ever got to attend a Major League Baseball game during my childhood. I want you to hop in a time machine with me and go back to 1994 on this episode of Bases Beautiful. Stick around.
It's a long fly ball deep to right. Way back! It's gone! Home run! How about that?
Marino is right on target. We are live from the Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida. There's a sellout crowd, of course. Oh, did you just call it? And he does! Mantle hits a high fly ball. It's deep left center field. It's way out there.
In a different time, the first commissioner of baseball said nearly every boy builds a shrine to some baseball hero. And before that shrine, a candle always burns. The connection to baseball usually begins in childhood, when imagination operates most freely, when the feel of the game captures you, when mimicking the mannerisms of your favorites is part of what it means to be a fan.
Welcome back to Bases Beautiful. My name is MD, and today we're getting into a little bit of story time. This is a video response to Brent Richards' baseball cards. He's a good guy in the hobby. Love Brent's videos, love his channel, and just appreciate what he brings to the hobby. And so I wanted to give this shout out, even though this goes beyond the time that he had for his actual giveaway in terms of prizes. But I mean, you can still respond to a video, right? I mean, I don't think there's any time limit, especially because he loves the stories. And I'm sorry, Brent, like this is not like the greatest story ever told or anything like this. This is just me being so ornery about the details and trying to make sure that I could actually paint a certain picture of the time in which these events happened, because it's not so much about the day at the ballpark as it is everything else around it, and kind of that feeling of being a child and a baseball fan in the year 1994. And so I had to dig and hunt to even find any evidence of the events that took place, because here's the reality. I live in Tupelo, Mississippi, and I grew up here. And so if you were going to go to a baseball game, you were going to drive at least 5 hours over to Atlanta, 6 hours north to St. Louis, 9 hours to Houston, Texas, and anywhere else. So baseball games, going to the ballpark as a kid, at least for Major League games, was just not something that I got to participate in, except for this one time. And it's this one time that I'm going to talk about. And it's not like it's just a Thursday night in July. I've been to maybe 20 Major League Baseball games in my life. They're always just random games. I mean, they're fun, of course. I like them and all that, but it's not like I'm catching a milestone or there's some great event or something that happens. But this whole story is about taking us back to the year 1994. So let's go back to 1994 together.
The X-Files. Don't watch it alone.
Put it down!
Goodbye.
Hey. Oh, you must be Kramer. I've heard about you.
From the outside, he's on fire!
When they were passing out brains, you thought they said trains. And then you got on a train and then went for a ride.
What's my destiny, Mom?
You're gonna have to figure that out for yourself.
So I mark time by movies. If you say the date 1994, immediately in my mind, I think of Forrest Gump, because Forrest Gump came out in 1994, and I saw it in the movie theater that summer. And so I can mark time by the movies that came out. And 1994 is certainly no exception.
How dare you, sir?
Based on the #1 bestseller, Clear and Present Danger. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jamie Lee Curtis in a James Cameron film.
1994 was the summer of Clear and Present Danger. It was the summer of The Lion King. It was the summer of Forrest Gump. And it was the summer of True Lies. Now, I didn't get to see True Lies in the movie theater. It was rated R. My parents wouldn't let me go see it, and so I had to catch it on video a couple of years later. But I know I watched all the trailers for those movies on TV, and I was just so excited about movies. But the other passion that I had was baseball. And so this is a picture of me in 1994. I've confirmed that this actually is from that year. Look at little old MD, just not being great at baseball. It was my dad's old glove he let me borrow. I'm wearing a watch, which is hilarious because I hated wearing watches. But there you go. Crazy things happen sometimes. And so this summer, I was so into baseball, because by 1994, I've already had at least 2 seasons of following the Braves intensively. And if you watched one of my older videos where I talk about Greg Maddux and Fred McGriff coming to the team, and the meaning of those players for me, these guys are both on the team in the 94 season. They came over in 93. So 94 is a big year, and the Braves, of course, are a great team. They're a contender. They're expected to be a contender. They've been a contender the last several seasons. And as we're going into the year, I mean, they're, as far as I can remember, of course, to me, as an 11-year-old kid, they're the greatest team in baseball, no questions asked, and all of their team should have been on the All-Star team and all these kinds of things. But I know my dad took me to a game, and I remember some of the logistics around the game, but there's so many specifics that I had completely forgotten about until I had to dig in and actually figure out, when did this happen? Because I couldn't remember for sure. I couldn't remember that it was 94. And so here we are, me and my dad's tickets to the Atlanta Braves versus the Florida Marlins on Thursday, July 14th, 1994, 7:40 p.m. And $5 for each of these tickets. That's hilarious. So I knew I had these somewhere, and so I was digging through boxes, and that's why this video is late getting up. But I wanted to be sure, because I knew if I knew the year, I could remember more about who I was as a person at this point, where the team was, some other aspects of historical context that I find interesting, and I hope others do too. I mean, we're all semi-historians here in the sports card community, because we're all collecting these little pieces of history, and we all do our little show and tell every time. I mean, I've got here pamphlets and booklets and ticket stubs and everything else, like I'm about to do what did I do over the summer, first day of school kind of thing. But we love show and tell. So I wanted to be exact, because the deal is 1994 was a pivotal year, because it is the year that I changed in my view of the sport. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So July 14th, 1994, this is the first game after the All-Star break.
A warm July night in the Steel City. Temperature right now 85 degrees as we're getting set for the 65th renewal of baseball's All-Star Game, the 4th time the city of...
And if you watch the All-Star Game from 1994, you knew that it was a big year. The National League won after 6 years of drought of the National League not winning. The National League ended up winning the game because they tied it up in the ninth inning. I guess the bottom of the ninth inning it would have been, with Fred McGriff hitting a 2-run home run to tie it up 7-7.
And the ball is skied to left center field. Lofton goes back. Lofton to the fence. She's gone!
Which then sent it into extra innings, and the National League ended up winning, I think, in the 10th inning with Moises Alou. So coming out of that, I mean, that would have been the last game that I would have watched. I know I watched that game. I could remember pieces of it as I was rewatching that game this afternoon, and just trying to get myself back into the mindset of the time as a kid watching the sport, remembering the things that I enjoyed, remembering the team, remembering the players, remembering the atmosphere, Bob Costas and Joe Morgan and Bob Euchre calling the game.
But an all-star memory for you? Well, it would have to be 1966 for me, Bob. The St. Louis Cardinals invited me back for the all-star game that year. I worked the concession stands on a very hot day and really didn't catch a break there either. They gave me hot chocolate. I mean, I couldn't believe it, 106 degrees.
It was a step back in time. And so as you can see here on the schedule, this handy brought to you by Budweiser, King of Beers, this 1994 Atlanta Braves schedule, I have written out in my handwriting at the time, go to Braves game, pointed at July 14th. So, you know, really I remember going there because I had never really spent time in Atlanta. And Atlanta, in my mind, you know, as a kid from Tupelo, Mississippi, which has about 30,000 people in it, Atlanta, of course, is a massive city compared to Tupelo. And when you actually have a train system and things like that, it really feels huge. And we actually did use the MARTA train service. My dad had a couple of coworkers who would attend Braves games frequently, and he had asked them of the best way to logistically get around. And so we ended up staying at a hotel up in Buckhead and taking the MARTA from the Lenox station all the way down to the West End to attend Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, the game that night. And I do remember that I believe that there were and my dad has said that there were buses or shuttles there at the station to take people directly from the West End station the rest of the way to Fulton County Stadium. And part of this was to avoid, there was so much construction in the area because Atlanta was building Turner Field, and so it was getting ready for the 1996 Olympics. And so the normal parking situation was no longer a normal parking situation, so it was a little more fragmented than what it had been in the past. Now, this game, really in the grand scheme of any Braves games, is completely forgettable, and literally I forgot about it. Like, I forgot what actually happened. I couldn't remember who the Braves were playing. I couldn't remember the score. I did feel like the Braves lost the game, which was true. And I couldn't remember, who had a hit, or I don't remember what I ate. I can barely remember where we sat. I mean, I feel like it was in the outfield bleachers, looking down. I know it was out in the outfield. I can't remember if we were up in the higher deck or if we were lower, but, definitely picked up a few paraphernalia items. This is excited about all the new Braves rookies, Ryan Klesko, Javier Lopez being two of the big ones. But And this was something that they sold at the ballpark so that you could have a fuller context for the team and some of the players. Now, I didn't remember that the Braves were playing the Marlins, but it's interesting. I had this pack. It's funny. Some of my stuff, it feels like I'm just kind of like my own personal archaeology. I'm trying to figure out. I knew why I had, the Braves team set from 1994. What I've never understood is why I had the Marlins team set from 1994. I understood also why I had the White Sox team set from 1994 because I liked Frank Thomas. But the Marlins was always a surprising one to me. And I actually just recently got rid of it. I gave it a shout out to a little boy named Bennett, who's a friend of a coworker. I gave him a whole bunch of my old cards, and I'm pretty sure that 94 Florida Marlins team stadium club set was in there because I could not figure out for the life of me why I had that a couple months ago when I gave that away. But that had to have been why. I got it because I had seen the Marlins play the Braves in Atlanta that year. And so I know that we took the train, we got to the game, we enjoyed the game and all of that. And I remember my dad did buy me a jersey or a shirt. I mean, they didn't really do jerseys at this point, but it was kind of a button-up shirt that you could wear as if you were a baseball player. And I had this still in my set, and he got me a fitted cap for the Braves, and so that's where I picked up those two items for sure. But so that game, the Marlins beat the Braves 5-3. Steve Avery was pitching. He was the starting pitcher. Was the favorite player of one of my friends named Clay. Steve Avery, man, that's where you broke my heart because I come in, I'm excited about the game, and he ends up giving up 4 runs in the very first inning. Jerry Brown, playing for the Marlins, hits a solo home run. Gary Sheffield hits a double. Benito Santiago ends up beating out an infield hit to Avery, and anyway, I guess all hell broke loose in that inning, and the Braves never really caught up.
Second batter of the game, Jerry Brown, and this one is gone. Steve Avery giving up the gopher ball. Brown's first of the year, and Florida up 1-0. Charlie O'Brien then snapped throw to first, but Jeff Conine is safe. McGriff just missed the tag. Marlins got 3 more in the first, make it 4-0. And then to the bottom of the first, Jeff Blauser, the deep drive to center, but Chuck Carr, the great defense, hits the wall, and this is called synchronized souvenir diving. Thank goodness for friends, huh? Nice play. Could have been the pod, but it isn't. There's the fish extend the Braves slump. Atlanta's dropped 10 of 16 overall.
Mark Lemke ended up having a couple of hits in the game. Fred McGriff had a hit, but otherwise, it was just not that memorable of a game. But what this time period, though, to me was so pivotal because the other thing that was happening at this point in time in July of 1994, and it's a theme throughout the All-Star game if you're watching it, is the idea that the players are preparing for a strike.
If there is a cloud hanging over this game in general and this season in particular, it is that of a possible baseball players' strike. Now, a strike date has not yet been set. There has been so much gloom and doom about the situation. What do you rate the chances of a players' strike this summer?
Well, to tell you the truth, I think there's a good chance that there will be a strike, unfortunately. And why I say that is that history has taught me that one of the things the owners like to do before they negotiate fairly is to see if the players are unified. And the only way for them to find that out is if, indeed, they let the players go out and see if there's any division amongst players. But hopefully, once they find that unification, which I indeed expect that they will, we can go ahead and make some quick progress and try to make this as short a work stoppage as possible.
And it's the players' strike that ends up happening not a month after this game on August 12th, 1994, the players' strike hits. And of course, famously, there was no World Series that year. It was a shortened season. And, some of the home run records and things like that were being chased. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, Ken Griffey Jr., Frank Thomas, and Matt Williams were all in the hunt at the All-Star break chasing Roger Maris's single-season home run record. And Jeff Bagwell was right on their heels. And all of that kind of comes apart in the season because the season ends prematurely because of the player strike. And, sadly enough, I am one of the casualties, really, of the player strike that year. I mean, as a kid, so excited about the Braves, so excited about baseball. I'm playing baseball. I lost interest in baseball after the summer. So this whole thing is a bit, I guess, bittersweet because, the player strike just kind of destroyed the interest that I was cultivating myself for the sport. And I mean, I tried to do Little League the next summer of 95. My heart really wasn't in it. I can tell by my collecting history that I may have bought 1 or 2 packs of cards in 1995, but I did not keep up with the hobby as a kid going forward at that point. And so baseball just kind of faded away for me until really my wife and I were together and living in Georgia, and she would do these work trips, and we in this small town, there was really nothing to do. We would order pizza, have it delivered to the hotel, and pulled up ESPN one night, and they were just showing a baseball game, and we started watching. At that point, it was the Philadelphia Phillies and Chase Utley and Ryan Howard era of Phillies, and started to gain an interest again in the sport for me personally that would kind of simmer below the surface, pop up here and there as I had opportunity to watch the games. But it was really, it wasn't until just 2 or 3 years ago that I really got back into the sport. And then that triggered me getting back into the hobby. So anyway, like I said, I mean, this isn't like some great story. I'm sorry it took me so long to even tell it, but I really wanted, I'm a stickler for the details. I like the history of it, and I want to make sure that I get those things right because I think that they're meaningful once you start to connect some of the pieces together and you realize the context of the time. And, just one last thing I found when I was looking through everything was in the late summer of 94. I mean, this August 29th, so this came out after the baseball strike was happening. But U.S. News and World Report issues a baseball magazine just talking about the history of the game and some of its great players. Also kind of thinking about the fact that I don't know if this was the point when Ken Burns' baseball documentary was coming out or if that had already happened maybe the prior summer, but baseball was kind of on the ascent culturally in some ways. And then, I don't know the long-term ramifications. I don't know if there's others here who were active and paying attention during the players' strike, and if you remember kind of the consequences of that. Just a couple of last notes for Brent, because he's from Houston Astros fan. It made me laugh, Brent, because in the 1994 All-Star game, there were, I think, 5 Houston Astros were in it, and it was, of course, Bagwell and Biggio, and then it was Ken Caminiti, and then Doug Drabek, and then John Hubeck, I think is his name, a relief pitcher. Houston overrepresented in the National League that year. Just again, like such an interesting time and place. And I ended up finding this. I know you are a big fan of the Astrodome, as I am. And this would have been, I would have gotten this brochure when my dad and my uncle and I all went to Houston there was a Christian conference that was happening there at the Astrodome in the summer of 1995. And I was always a big fan of the Astrodome, fascinated by it, and actually still had the parking ticket from us going there. But I remember just walking around through the Astrodome in 1995 in awe of everything, wishing I could see a baseball game there. But of course we were there for other reasons, and there was no game happening at that time. But anyway, man, I know this is long and I know this is late in the offering, but I hope it was enjoyable. I hope it was a little step back in time. Obviously, it was fun for me to kind of step back and remember some things, and hopefully it's meaningful for others. You know, were you around in 1994 thinking about the sport? How did the player strike hit you? I'd love to hear some others kind of reflect on the player strike and the impact that had, especially if you were really young in your time as a fan. But anyway, thank you for taking the time to watch. I so appreciate it. And this has been Bases Beautiful, and we'll see you next time.
The current local radar showing any precipitation in your area. Intensity is indicated by the color code at the top of the screen.